All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be taking a look at the Texas Longhorns defense. And is it the nation's best heading into 2025? They certainly had one of the top 2 or 3 defenses in CFB a season ago. And even with a monumental amount of departures, they're still geared up to have a phenomenal season on this side of the ball. We'll talk about each individual positional group throughout the video. We're going to start with the defensive line, though. They've been incredibly dominant for the Longhorns the past couple of seasons. You have 3 more guys here departing, though. They were just instrumental for them. Barron Sorrell, Vernon Broughton, Alfred Collins. Those are going to be some sizable losses. And, of course, the year before that, they had a handful of big guys as well, and Sweat and Murphy depart. And they were able to replace them with ease. And now, though, I feel like they're going to have a bit of what happened to Georgia, Nick, where they had a couple years in a row with flat-out elite defensive linemen. And then, the last 2 seasons, they've kind of taken a bit of a step back in terms of dominance in the trenches. Now, they're still very good, right? That's not a shot at Georgia at all. But they're still not dominating to the level they were with those elite NFL talents. That's just a fact about it, Nick. I mean, they're still very great. The Texas run defense has been very good for a long time, and I expect that to continue. But in terms of overwhelming dominance, I think that might sidestep a little bit into 2025. They're still going to be great here. What are your opinion on that before we dive into some of the names they do return?
Yeah, you certainly expect some sort of drop-off for this Texas defensive line. This has been a unit that's been producing at a high click for the last couple of seasons. They've been really good under Steve Sarkisian. He's built himself a very strong defensive line. They're really good against the run. They clog holes. They're physical on the defensive line. They dominate in the trenches, which is a big key in the SEC, a conference where you have a lot of programs that are very strong and dominant in the trenches like Alabama and Georgia, and you have to find a way to compete at that level. They brought in a lot of guys who they were able to develop, a lot of guys that were big, solid physical assets that they're able to develop, but these players turn over, they move on to the NFL draft, and now you got to find a way to plug those holes. And for the first time in a while, they went out to the portal and added some key pieces on the defensive line to fill some of the holes. It seems like some of the depth was finally catching up to them. They still have some incredibly talented pieces in the defensive line, but they had to go out to the portal and grab some guys that they're going to plug in that we'll talk about in a second. So it's finally catching up to them a little bit. It feels this is still going to be a very strong defensive line, one of the best units in the conference, but it takes a step back. It certainly does, and that's a natural thing to expect. I think that's something you understand and deal with if you're a Texas fan, but how far of a step back is it going to be, and will it hurt this team's chances of competing in the conference and for national title?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and start with what they do have on the interior, because that's the group that has the most turnover here, where they don't return much like they do in terms on the edge. That is Travis Shaw, the former 5-star from North Carolina. There was a lot of 5-stars at North Carolina that did not pan out under Mac Brown's tenure, but they go ahead and pick up a guy who's 6'5", 330. It was a deep defensive line group, and he couldn't really find the field at UNC. He's going to have a big role here. I think that's a lot of untapped potential, and this staff has proven they can develop these guys. He's going to be matched with Cole Brevard. He's a big body, 300-plus pounds, 333 to be exact, coming from Purdue. His best season a season ago for the Boilermakers, where they struggled immensely, but there were certainly some bright spots on their roster, and Brevard was one of them. Kano Hero, he didn't play much at Ohio State, but he's 6'5", 300. He's a 4-star out of California, has some twitch and good motor. He played a couple of seasons for the Buckeyes sparingly, though. And then Justice Terry, Nick, a true freshman who arrives from the state of Georgia. This is a guy that was committed to USC at one point. It looked like he was going to go to the Bulldogs. He ends up at Texas. I think this is a great addition for them, because it looks like they need players like this who can come in now with, a slew of departures, and a player who has, great quickness, nice explosive athlete. He's got size as well. He should come in and make an immediate impact. What do you think of the makeover on the interior?
They did a lot of work on the interior, right? They went in and they did a whole lot, and they kind of had to. This is a unit, like I said, that was losing a lot of key pieces, particularly on the interior. So they went out and got a bunch of different guys, which is what you got to do in this situation. They go out and bring in a bunch of different key pieces that could be impacts, players early on. I look certainly at the freshman and Justice Terry. I want to certainly talk about him, 6'5", 290, coming out of Manchester, Georgia, a guy who's had a long commitment cycle. Like you said, was linked with Georgia, was linked with some other programs, Auburn, USC, and schools of that nature, those dominant traditional forces. Ends up opting to go with Texas, a 5-star number 13 player in the class, number 3 defensive line piece. I think the size is great with him, right? I think the potential to really develop him into a star is certainly there. I look at Keanu Hero. I think this is a kid that got some potential coming out of California, didn't really do a whole lot at Ohio State, did not play much, only has about 14 total tackles over his career. But he's a guy looking for a new lease on life, and he plugs in potentially to a defense where there could be reps available. Travis Shaw, I think, is a really good add for the former 5-star, 26 total tackles last year, 4 tackles for loss on UNC, plus a quarterback hurry. I think he could be involved early on. Expect him to start 6'5", 330. He's a very big physical player in the interior. Expect him to be big in the run defense category. Will also be solid at getting after the quarterback potentially. And then Cole Brevard was previously at Penn State, ended up at Purdue. Had a decent enough season and a bad team, right, in my opinion. 19 total tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. Is not bad numbers on a team that was absolutely terrible last year. Purdue, one of the worst teams in the Power 4. He comes down here, 6'3", about 330. I think he'll be really solid in the interior. I think they can get a lot out of him, playing him potentially at nose tackle. He's a big physical guy that'll be solid at clogging the run. Also was able to get a few tackles for losses and a sack and a half, so you could potentially get some quarterback pressures out of him as well. I think that could be a really big add from the guy out of Purdue.
Those are the 4 newcomers. You have 2 returnees, second-year guys Alex January and Melvin Hills. Both arrived on campus last year at over 300-plus pounds. So the size is going to continue to be overwhelming on the interior. That's what, certainly separates a lot of these SEC schools in high-end Power 4 schools from other teams. Is just the size is absurd. And Texas, they're leading the way when it comes to that category.
Yeah, a lot of big size here. These are huge players that rattled off a lot of those, size. A lot of those guys big in the 300-plus pound category, which I think is really key for your defensive line. Really tough to run against that when you have so many big physical moving pieces there in the interior.
Now you move to the edge department, one that doesn't have too many newcomers. They have returnees across the board. Colin Simmons, he was everything you would hope for from a 5-star true freshman last year. Quickness off the edge, was very disruptive, played less than 500 snaps compared to some of the other starters on this defense who were pushing 700 to 900 snaps on defense, and he ended up with the second most TFL on the team of 14 of them. 9 sacks as well, had 3 forced fumbles. I mean, this kid is going to be the next elite superstar in terms of pass rushing in CFB. Ethan Burke, this is a guy who hasn't really shown that development into a star like he showed early on. Remember a couple years ago, he had a monster game against Alabama. Did have a TFL that won 5 straight games at the end of the year. So he was a consistent player against the run, has length. Wasn't as consistent overall this past season, though, especially as a pass rusher, but he is a veteran that's going to be productive from time to time. And then Trey Moore, he did not dominate as early as he did at, as easy that is, as he did at UTSA, but he's still a great player, should be productive this year, has inside moves, speed and quick hips, a year to adjust to, the physicality of this conference, I think is going to do him wonders. Then another guy here in Colton Vasek, a 4-star in the class of 2023. He's 6'5". He's an active run defender with length. He's a great guy in terms of chase down speed, has a respectable pass rush plan. I think he's one player that's going to step up often this year for Texas. Not many question marks for this edge rushing department, Nick. You know what you're going to get, and then some.
You know what you're going to get, and you're going to get a lot of production, a lot of talented pieces. Simmons was really good, despite the limited snaps, 48 total tackles for him. 14 tackles for loss, 9 sacks, and a pick. He was all over the place, just a physical beast, really stepped up as a true freshman, looked really good, was very impressed. Ethan Burke, obviously you expect a little bit more out of him, but I think the stats are still solid. 27 total tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, a pick 6, and 4 pass breakups for him. Maybe you want a little bit more out of him. Hopefully he can find a way to develop a little bit this year, but I think he's still a player that's got a lot left in the tank. Colton Vasek looked good in his limited starts, 7 total tackles for him, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, decent numbers there for a guy that didn't get a whole lot of reps. Trey Moore was highly sought after out of the portal, a guy whose name was all over the place when he entered the portal out of UTSA, ended up staying in the state of Texas. Didn't have the most phenomenal season, but I still think this was a really good season, right? 35 total tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. As he's adjusting to the higher pace of play, expect him to be a really strong physical asset this year. I'm expecting big things out of him, coming off the edge there, putting a lot of pressures on the quarterback. This is a very good edge rushing group that should get a ton of sacks. It should be physical beasts early on that put a ton of pressure on the offensive line.
Now we move to the middle of this 4-2-5. The linebacking group for Texas is one that has a lot of upside. And of course, you cannot go without talking about Anthony Hill. He's probably going to be the best linebacker in CFB this year. Elite speed. He's used as a QB spy. And with how great this front four was last year, they had no issues versus dual threat quarterbacks. I mean, you see in the Texas A&M game, the defensive line was phenomenally overwhelming. The quarterback and Marcel Reed would try to step up, and Hill would be right in his face of a spy. So the scheming you can do with a player like this in your D-line just makes this thing, the machine of Texas' defense, flow so perfectly. And for the most part, he was good in coverage. Really struggled in the college football playoff, though, against the ASU and Clemson. He was a great run-stopper throughout the season, though. Oyana Lafau, Willie emerged late in the year as a quality run defender and good tackler. Some impressive physical traits to his name as well. I think he's going to take a big step this season. And then battling for playing time behind them will be Ty Anthony Smith. He's a rising sophomore. He's an athletic backer. Might be used often as a blitzer, really closes fast. We'll need to see if he's added on enough strength, though, to be a clogger on running downs. But he should see a nice role on third down, I think, early on, regardless of that mass on his body. And then Brad Spence, a good third-year player out of Houston, was strong for Arkansas this past year, especially as a run stopper. His best ball came across the back half of the season, so he's still looking to, keep that momentum in style as he enters a new program. I like this group. Depth will still need to be sorted out. They have a five-star player in safety, Jonah Williams, that could potentially play there if needed. He's a guy with a bigger frame, and he's also tabbed as an elite athlete. So that has to be figured out, Nick. But in terms of the players we just listed off, I love this linebacking group.
Yeah, I love this linebacking core. And anytime you return your top tackler from the previous season, you got to be pretty happy about that. Anthony Hill was a commander on the defense, a really good leader, 113 total tackles, 17 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, and a pick, 4 forced fumbles. Just really good numbers from him there. Was really impressed. Liana Lafayu was really solid as well. 63 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 2 pass breakups, and a pick for him. Solid numbers there. Ty Anthony Smith showed me that there's a lot of progress that could be developed with him. 16 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and a pick for him. I think he can continue to develop and be a strong asset. Brad Spence, I think this was a solid add out of the portal, a guy at Arkansas who had a pretty good second half of the season and a good season overall. 54 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, plus a QB hurry. Was okay in 2023 as well in limited reps. He ends up coming over here from Arkansas. I think this is a good add. This is a guy that's got a lot left in the tank, a good player that's got experience playing SEC football. Not a bad add for a rotational piece if you ask me. Really, I think you could do a lot with him. A really solid add out of the portal.
Now he moved to the Texas secondary. One statistically that was incredibly dominant a year ago. Only allowed 9 touchdowns compared to 22 interceptions. I mean, that's staggering. I mean, they went multiple games in a row with interceptions. This is a team that was great against some top-notch opponents. I feel like they'd probably struggle a little bit against Clemson. They did give up 336 in that one. And then some of the passing numbers in the CFP weren't as great. This is still an incredibly tough defense to get through in the back end. You're going to start with the cornerback room. Jedi Barron, he was great in the slot for many years. They moved him to outside corner in his first year doing so. He won the Thorpe Award. I mean, that just shows you the coaching and the skill they have here at Texas. Malik Muhammad, on the other hand, he's been really sturdy in coverage the last 2 years. Wasn't as great this past season, but he also saw significantly more snaps. I think he'll be an all-conference performer, no doubt. The rest of the group at corner, though, it's really going to have to figure itself out behind Muhammad, because you got Kobe Black. He was the 60th ranked recruit in last year's class. He's got good size, 6'2", 200, pretty fluid mover with some good studness, has ball skills along with some body control. He could be a real star. You have Santana Wilson, a redshirt freshman. He possesses a lot of speed, and he's also the son of Adrian Wilson, a former NFL star defensive back. Warren Robertson enters his 3rd year in the program. He was a 4-star safety out of high school. So the cornerback room has some things to figure out. You replace, Jedi Barron, an elite player, and Gavin Holmes, who I thought was a bit of a liability at times for them. Muhammad's going to take one cornerback role. The other parts need to be sorted out, Nick, and that could be a bit of an issue for Texas early on.
Certainly have to find a way to sort out that second side. I think you really feel good with Malik Muhammad. He had a really solid season this past year. I think he's a good player overall. 36 total tackles, a tackle for loss for him, 8 pass breakups, a really good coverage asset. You feel good about having him there. I think you want to continue to play him in his natural position. I think he's going to be really solid this year. I look at Kobe Black, who's probably going to be the starter as of right now for me. 13 total tackles and a pass breakup for Black. As a true freshman last year, decent enough reps. While Warren Robinson, could he convert to a full-time corner? I think it's certainly a gamble. He had 6 total tackles and a tackle for loss last year. I think you rock with Muhammad and Black to go on the starting front for this offense. Their defense, that is, they're going to be tested early on with a tough road trip in their first game of the season against defending national champions. So it's going to be a trial by fire. I think you got to go with that right now, Muhammad and Black. That should be the way to start it. But the safeties group can certainly help out this cornerback unit, because this is a good safeties group we'll talk about in a second here.
Yeah, of course. They'll figure this stuff out in, summer and fall camp. Moving to the safety group, I think this one is absolute dynamite. You're going to start with Jelani McDonald. Mainly played free safety, but played the entire game versus Arizona State in the slot. Was targeted frequently, but held up very well. He did a very good job in that game against the Sun Devils. Of course, it's not a team with many pass-catching weapons, though, so we'll see what type of consistency he has against tougher opponents if they roll him out in the slot. But I think he'll probably stay at safety. Michael Taft, on the other hand, he was elite. Showcased high-end football IQ, good range and coverage. Not exactly the downhill thumper that Andrew Macumba was, but this is a great player. Was good for Texas all season long. Derek Williams, I'm really excited for what he can provide. He was a high-ranked top 70 recruit in the class of 2023. Had a knee injury derail his season just a couple months ago, or last fall that is, but he was an impactful run defender, made big plays in his brief appearances. He had an interception against Michigan, forced a fumble versus Oklahoma, played lots of snaps in 2023 as well. So I wonder if Williams will push for more time potentially in the slot. This is a player that I think they have to get on the field, Nick. And then Xavier Filasami, he's a 5-star in last year's class. They flipped from Florida last moment. So they're incredibly stacked at safety. And then Jalen Gilbew enters his fourth year in the program. He was a consistently solid performer last year. Has played his entire career in the slot. So I expect him to anchor that down once more. But there are some guys pushing him here, I think, for playing time, potentially, Nick. Will they want to maybe transition him to more of a full-time corner, kind of like they did with Barron will be remaining up for grabs. There's a lot to sort out in this safety group, though. And I think that's a good thing for Texas because they have so much talent.
They have a lot of talent. Michael Toffee is really solid, good leader, the second returning tackler on this team, 78 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him, 2 picks, 10 pass breakups. Just a stat sheet suffer, really good as, and in pass defense, really solid. Gilaboo is really solid as well, 58 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, a sack, 3 pass breakups, good numbers there. McDonald, he can develop certainly as a prospect, 33 total tackles, a tackle for loss for him, and a pick, while Derek Williams was looking really good in the 4 games he played prior to injury, 11 total tackles and interception for him, plus a fumble recovery prior to that injury. And then Xavier Filasami is a guy that they really were high on when they flipped him from Florida, 5 total tackles last year for him in limited reps. He only played in 7 games. Want to see what he looks like this year. I'm confident in the safety room. This is a good safety room with some really talented players, some younger players that I continue to develop, and I think they're a very key asset for the secondary. I like what the safety room can do.
Yeah, you look at some of the other reserves in this group. Jordan Johnson-Rubel, a versatile player with vision, good open field tackling abilities, and you have Wardell Mack, a 4-star, kept his red shirt intact last fall. He's a good man cover corner, has a quick trigger on short throws like screens and slants. Overall, I love the secondary for Texas. Like I said, it's going to be trial by fire at corner early on, at least it seems. But overall, a lot of excitement, especially with what they have with the safety group. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of shuffle these pieces around the chessboard. Overall, Nick, I know it's early March. We still have a lot of defenses to look at, but Texas, they're going to come in top 5 for me. That's a lock, I would say. And they might even push for that number 1 category as we enter 2025. This defense is going to be incredibly stout, though, across the board. Even with a lot of departures, Steve Sarkisian has his group intact.
Yeah, I like what they can do here. I think this is a really good secondary unit that's got some talented pieces. I think the defensive line is really good. They brought in some key pieces that I like as well. I still think this is a top 5 defense in the nation. This is a very strong unit. I'm very high on Texas this year. I think this is a team that's got a lot to really go after. The schedule is, has some tough spots. There's some tough road trips in there. They certainly start on August 30th at Ohio Stadium playing the defending national champions they lost to in the playoffs. That's a big key game. Can this defense really look good against what is going to be still a very strong passing attack from Ohio State? That's a tough test early on. If they can pass that test of flying colors, they can sort it out through the rest of the season. This Texas defense looks to be a very strong unit.
That's going to be it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.